Hi, and welcome to Chapter 7 on Innovation and Change. The last chapter we did was on planning and strategy, and so now we're digging in a little bit and looking at innovation and change in business and why it's so important. So again, I recommend that you please follow along with your book and that hopefully you have already read the content of the chapter so that this PowerPoint presentation here that I'm lecturing for you is something that you can commit to memory in a better way and also just process easier. I'm on page 136, and to get started I want to go right in to the example from your author about the Edge, this smart building in Amsterdam. It's really fascinating, and I wanted to kind of dig in a little bit with that, and just it's such a fun, interesting, innovative chapter on again, innovation and change, that I just thought, let me just rely on some of the material that's out there to show you. So this is an article from Bloomberg that came out in 2015 that's highlighting this again, that company, the Edge, as the smartest building in the world, and I want to share that with you. So let me bring that in.
Welcome to the Edge. This is certifiably the greenest office building in the world. But that just might be the least interesting part about it, because the Edge in Amsterdam is also possibly the most connected office space in the world. Working at the Edge is insane. It all starts with a smartphone app developed by the building's main tenant, the consulting firm Deloitte. When you arrive at the Edge, a camera recognizes you by your license plate for automatic access. And because it's the Netherlands, there are chargers available for electric cars. Inside, things start to get interesting because you don't have a desk. No one here does. Workspaces are assigned to you based on your schedule for the day. You have options: a work booth, a meeting room, what they call a concentration room, a sitting desk, a standing desk, a balcony desk. You can even just hang out in the sun-filled atrium all day. This concept is called hot desking, and it's what allows Deloitte to have 2,500 workers, but less than half as many desks at its Dutch headquarters. The app knows your preferences, and when you arrive at your workspace, the lights dim or brighten based on your stored settings. And any of the building's massive flat screens can be instantly paired with an iPhone or a laptop. So what makes all this possible? The LED light panels developed by Philips specifically for the Edge are actually powered by low-voltage Ethernet cables, which means every light in the building becomes its own internet-connected data hub with 28,000 sensors that makes the building and its users smarter.
The building becomes a very important part of who we are and what we want to be, and we actually seen in recruitment that more people are now spontaneously coming to Deloitte because they want to work in this building.
Oh yeah, and then there's these. The building has solar on the roof and on the south-facing wall, enough to power the building and all of the electric cars, computers, and smartphones used by its employees. And those employees are kept warm by two enormous boreholes tunneling more than 400 feet down beneath the building. During the summer, the Edge pumps warm water deep into the aquifer, where it sits insulated until it can be sucked back out in the winter to warm the building. Outside, there are beehive towers and bat homes to support the local pollinators. And even the rainwater is collected to flush the toilets and irrigate the gardens.
We are planning to build a lot more buildings like these, and the next one will be smarter, and the one after that will be smarter as well. And we won't stop until all cities in the world are filled with buildings that are intelligent and that are not using any energy anymore. In the end, we will actually need less buildings in the world, but the buildings that are there will be used in a better way, will be more efficient, and will be using a lot less energy than in the past.
Sometimes the Edge just feels like it's showing off, and some of the app functionality isn't quite ready for prime time yet. But most of the time, this is all running seamlessly in the background. It's maybe the most fully realized vision of the Internet of Things the world has ever seen.
It's a building that has sustainability as an important aspect of making a good place to work. In Dutch, there is even a word for this new kind of thinking about the workspace, het nieuwe werken. In a nutshell, it means that workspace is more focused on the tasks that need to be done and the working community that it's part of.
Another day at the Edge comes to an end. A custom security robot that looks a bit like R2-D2 wakes up and begins its patrols. Now, if only the app could automatically come conjure up a nice dinner recipe, maybe provide all the fresh ingredients at the end of the day to get you cooking. No surprise, the Edge has that too. Bon appetit.
I hope you found this interesting. This is why I have wanted to share it with you again. It's just fascinating and a bit of a glimpse into the future, maybe. For the next clip, well, let me actually share with you. I wanted to kind of include this to give it just a little bit more of an applicable current understanding of what's happening in terms of innovation and ranking over time. So this is, you remember this from the last chapter on strategy, the BCG matrix, right? So that's obviously named after the Boston Consulting Group, a huge consulting firm. And this is one of the many things they do. They rank things. And so these are a pretty new ranking. This is from June of this year, showing you the most innovative companies out there over time. And so, you know, again, I wanted to share this with you. Of course, you can pretty much guess number one is still Apple, as we discussed before, worth $2 trillion until recently. Alphabet, Google, you know, Alphabet's the parent company of Google. And Amazon, number 3 there. Microsoft, number 4. So, I mean, just again, why am I showing you this? Because I want you to consider the direct link between market capitalization rate of these companies and, of course, where they rank in terms of innovation. Samsung, look at Samsung. I mean, really, over time, this company has just been astounding. Huawei has been in the news too. Alibaba has climbed. You know, we've talked about them as well. Anyway, it's just interesting to see as you kind of scale down where these companies are. All right, let's get to the learning outcomes. So we'll look at why innovation matters to companies. I think you already have a sense of that. The different methods that managers can use to effectively manage innovation in their organizations. Why not changing can lead to organizational decline. There's right now, especially in the middle of a pandemic, we're seeing who's coming out of this thing and who is not based on what they've done in terms of planning and innovation. The different methods that managers can use to better manage change as it occurs. And that's it. So let's get right to organizational innovation and technological cycle. So we're getting to page 138 right there. So first definition, organizational innovation, successful implementation of creative ideas in organizations. And then you're getting into technological or technology cycles, which begins with the birth of a new technology. And it ends when the technology reaches its limits and is replaced by newer and better technology. A very basic example that works from your author, air conditioning, replaced fans. There's tons of examples. Henry Ford, when he came up with the Model T, the first horseless carriage, if you will. Again, there are a zillion examples out there of these technological cycles. Now we're getting into trying to understand these cycles and looking at patterns. And so the S-curve pattern of innovation is something that's going to help us figure this out. It's characterized by a slow initial progress followed by rapid progress, and then slow progress again as technology matures and reaches its limits. There's the slope of the curve. So the steep slope, and we're on page 138 if you want to look at it now, but it'll show up in the next slide. The steep slope, small amounts of efforts will result in significant increases in performance. So that's why it's so steep. And then once you've gotten a little bit of a plateau there, you're getting into the flat slope, moving away from the steep slope, where increased effort will only bring small improvements in performance. Again, you can probably apply that to many, many examples of many products or services that you're familiar with in terms of innovation. So this is what it looks like, right? You have over here performance, right? And then you have effort. And then you're looking at discontinuity right there with now ABC becoming old technology and a new ABC or XYZ if you want with the replacing technology for that old technology. I put Intel over here because, you know, that's the first, I mean, you're all familiar with it. And probably some of you remember Moore's Law. But Intel's technology cycles have followed this pattern. Intel spends billions to develop new computer chips and to build new facilities to produce them. Intel has found that the technology cycle for its integrated circuits is about 3 years. And in each 3-year cycle, Intel spends billions to introduce a new chip, improves the chip by making it a little bit faster each year, and then replaces that chip at the end of the cycle with a brand new, different chip that is substantially faster than the old chip. So again, you can apply ABC there. All right, moving along to innovation streams. So these are patterns of innovation over time that can create sustainable competitive advantage. You get into this technological discontinuity. And again, if you think about where we were with the previous slide and how we moved from that older S curve and the newer S curve replaced the old one, when you got to C for the previous S curve, that's the technological discontinuity, right? Performance or functional breakthrough created by scientific advance or unique combination of existing technology. Discontinuous change is characterized by design competition and technological substitution. So what I have for you here is, again, I'm continuing with the examples from your author, some really cool, interesting examples. And this one is from the German company ThyssenKrupp with elevators. If you think about elevators, they haven't really changed for many, many years, right? You have a bunch of cables and the elevator goes up and down, and that's pretty much it. But think about the limitations to that, right? One elevator, and let's see, I don't know, you know, that's why if you look at some of the really the high rises, you will have an elevator going from the bottom floor, let's say, to floor 15. And then when you have to get out of that one to take another one to go from 15 to 22. So there's really a lot of restrictions and limitations in terms of the technology. ThyssenKrupp came up with some interesting ideas, and so this is a video from the company itself that I want to share with you.
1854, the birth of the elevator. This invention changed the way we live. One cabin, in one shaft, on one rope, traveling up and down. A principle that hasn't changed for 160 years. 2003, the twin elevator changed the industry. 2 cabins, independently in one shaft. In the future, more and more people will live in megacities. Today, building development is constrained by the forms of mobility available. A revolution is required. We started to reinvent the elevator concept. What if we were to omit the rope and have a direct drive as part of the elevator cabin? What if we were to provide more than 2 cabins in one shaft and let them circulate in a building. What if we were to invent a groundbreaking system, enabling the cabin to move, not only vertically, but also horizontally? No more limits in height, shape, and mobility. There are multiple possibilities. And that's why we call it multi.
All right. So again, by the way, a little update. ThyssenKrupp is literally floating its division on elevators, so the company's up for sale, I think, if anybody's interested. Let's see. Moving along. Innovation streams continued. So you're getting into the emergence of a dominant design. Think about everything you're seeing right now with the EV industry, right? The Economist magazine, I want to say about 4 years ago, perhaps, had a controversial cover about the death, the end of the combustion engine, and a lot of people got upset. And there was, of course, a lot of evidence to support why they had that. And today, if you think about, of course, Tesla, but not just Tesla, Hyundai, Kia, of course, Nissan, all of these companies are really starting to move more and more into EV, making EV mainstream. Elon Musk recently discussed a 1 million mile battery that I guess Tesla is coming very close to releasing this battery that will have a lifespan of 1 million miles. And that will really compete. It will, in fact, destroy a combustion engine because very, very few can even last more than a couple 100,000 miles. So if you think about EVs and the restrictions, right, the range anxiety and all that stuff, EVs, more and more, it looks as though the Economist was right again. And EVs might be coming out with a dominant design because in the end, it will be about cost. Tesla, if they're able to release this $15,000 car they're talking about, $20,000, there will be absolutely no reason for someone to spend money on a combustion engine, knowing that they'll have to pay for repairs and put oil in there, and you have belt and you have transmissions and all these things. Whereas, of course, electric car is just battery and then just one little motor, and you're done. Again, it's fascinating to see the EV industry coming out as slowly the dominant design. It's a new technological design process that becomes the accepted market standard. The example from your author was really cool. It's about QWERTY versus the Dvorak keyboard. Sorry. If you look at the top left keys, of course, of your keyboard right now, you will see QWERTY. That's why it's called QWERTY, and that's it. That's kind of like the standard. Fascinating. If you do a little bit of research, you'll find out that the Dvorak keyboard can get you to type much faster. I can't remember. I believe it was 5 times faster at least. But unfortunately, that did not become the dominant design, right? The QWERTY became the dominant design, which is what we're using now. This indicates companies that will prosper and companies that will face technological lockout in terms of emergence of a dominant design. And it signals a shift from experimentation and competition to incremental change. Again, if you want to think about the EV industry, ways to manage innovation. So now, because we make a case and we know that innovation is critical for survival. I just showed you case in point of the top ranked most innovative companies, and they're also the most valuable. So how do you manage innovation? Look at these pictures that I posted over here. They all have one thing in common. You might have seen them before. All of these pictures show you what it's like to work at the Google campus, right? Yes, there's a slide, very famous. You have these scenarios over here, bottom left. I think they call them the Swiss, can't remember. Somebody that thought it would be fun to have a little RV, and so there you go. There's the like jungle motif. And so famously, number one, Google measures everything. They even did a study on color for walls, and I believe it was purple. Purple was the least used room when they were trying to figure out where employees were booking the most room, etc. Just some really interesting stuff that came out. Why is Google doing all that? Because Google is going out of its way to foster, develop, and manage innovation, right? So you have to build a creative work environment to manage sources of innovation. Use experiential approach to manage innovation during discontinuous change. So this is going to be a big deal. We're going to talk about in just a bit, but the experiential approach is what you have to use when things are moving really, really fast, right? And then the compression approach to manage innovation during incremental change. So we're talking over here in the middle about very dynamic, fast-moving change, and over here at the bottom maybe slower when you're able to have more control over your environment because things maybe are moving slower. All right, so let's look at the components of the creative work environment. And so for this, the first thing we do, so we're looking at everything that's going to help us lead to this creative work environment. So the first thing we're going to do for this is start with challenging work as the first thing we'll look at, right? And so work is challenging when it requires effort, demands attention and focus, and is perceived as important to others in the organization. One of the things that we'll talk about in another chapter when we look at motivation, and one of the terms that we'll look at is flow. I did want to kind of bring it up now, however, because there's a quote here from your author on page 144 under challenging that goes like this. Let's see. According to researcher Michael Csikszentmihalyi, a challenging work promotes creativity because it creates a rewarding psychological experience known as flow. So we'll look at that in just a second. Flow is a psychological state of effortlessness in which you become completely absorbed in what you're doing and time seems to fly. I mean, for those of you who play any musical instruments, I know sometimes students who play video games, basically any time where you don't realize how quickly time has passed. You think you've only been there 30 minutes and it's been 3 hours. That's because you've experienced flow. When you're in a state of flow, your creativity is at its highest. So I wanted to, I have a hyperlink here for flow that takes you to Claremont Graduate University here in our backyard at Claremont at Chaffey College. And Michael Csikszentmihalyi is right here, distinguished professor of psychology and management. He's the founder, co-director, Quality of Life Research Center. We're very lucky. He's a local. He's right here. And because he's a local, some of your professors have had the good fortune of having studied under him and even had him on their dissertation as one of the advisors. Dr. Fareed Najad, if you ever have a chance to take her at Chaffey College, she is an expert in flow and you will learn a lot. So I just keep that name in mind. Dr. Fareed Najad, strongly recommended. Let's see, in organizational encouragement is the second we're going to look at. And so organizational encouragement of creativity, this occurs when management encourages risk-taking and new ideas, and also supports and fairly evaluates new ideas, rewards and recognizes creativity, and encourages the sharing of new ideas through different parts of the company. The example given by your author here is really interesting. It's about General Electric, and I know we've talked a lot about GE. GE Healthcare, honors teams who have, quote, dared to try new things and learn from failure. There's a lot of material out there about that. Later on in this class, when we start to look at operations and I start spending a little bit more time, this is chapter 18, the very last chapter. But I will. It's one of my favorite chapters because it's got a lot on quality with things we maybe don't even consider. And GE is really world renowned when it comes to quality. Just remember that GE is one of the leading manufacturing companies in jet engines, right? Think about that for a second. Think about manufacturing jet engines. You can never ever have any defects. Your defect rate has to be within the millionth, right, of beyond the decimal point. And this is where we'll talk about something like Six Sigma. But I want you to think about, for example, as we talk about organizational encouragement, I want you to kind of consider, not only is it good for creative work environment, but when you're the kind of company like GE and mistakes literally are celebrated and encouraged, what you get from that is a group of employees who improve your service, your company, but even more importantly, and this is something I want you to really listen to, more importantly, you've eliminated the fear that might end up in having them hide behind mistakes, right? You don't want to get in trouble. You don't want to get suspended for a week because you cost the company so much money because of a huge blunder. And so what you're going to do is hide behind that and not let your boss know, hey, I screwed up big time here. It's going to put us behind, 3 months and we're going to lose $4 million because of all the stuff I did with this jet engine over here. You can't do that in that environment. And so I hope you understand why it's critical to really eliminate fear, and that again, that will piggyback into chapter 18 and encourage people to come forward with mistakes. We'll talk about Dr. W.E. Deming, who was a pioneer in quality, and I've always liked one of his approach, which is that if your employees are able to manufacture a defect, you are the cause, management. You need to blame yourself, management, because you have created an environment that has made that employee even able to create the defect in the first place. So it was revolutionary when he came up with that, and in fact, a lot of companies thought he was crazy. So that's going to come up at the end, the very last chapter. I know we're only on chapter 7, but stay tuned. It'll be really interesting. All right, so moving along to supervisory encouragement. It occurs when supervisors provide clear goals, encourage open interaction with subordinates, and actively support development, teams, work, and ideas. GE has this thing called ecomagination to emphasize energy efficiency, and they talk about how they're really just gung-ho about ensuring that all of their employees come up with ways to cut waste, etc., etc. And then we're getting into the work group encouragement when group members have diverse experience, education, and backgrounds. You don't want people to have, when you have a bunch of engineers who went to the same school trying to develop something, you're in trouble, right? You want a lot of people from different backgrounds in these teams. This fosters mutual openness to ideas, right? You also for sure want freedom, which means give everybody autonomy, day-to-day work, a sense of ownership, control over their ideas. Google, a lot of the stuff that Google has come up with is not just because some manager told employees you need to design something like that. It's the other way around. It's employees having these like genius ideas and being empowered to pursue them. And by empowered, what I mean is time-wise, they can dedicate their time to some new idea, but also supported by the company and because of financial support, right? And then lastly, remove any type of organizational impediment. When we look at design in this class, later on, we'll eventually start to look at structures and design in industry, in management. And so as we look at that, we'll look at how corporations are set up, how they're organized, right? A tall mechanistic structure, for example, versus flat organic structure. And what we'll see is that it's the companies that remove these impediments, organizational impediments, that are going to be ahead of the game in terms of speed of design, and of course ensuring that they're supporting and fostering their work environment. In this example, your author talks about Levi Strauss, the jeans company, famously had their research and development in Turkey, and they were spending all kinds of money going back and forth between the headquarters, San Francisco, and Turkey, until finally somebody had the genius idea of moving that R&D center back to San Francisco. Now, some of you might think like, well, why did they go to Turkey in the first place? I want you to remember this. I want you to remember that there's 7.5 billion people on this planet, 330 million Americans. And so, for example, Toyota Motor Corporation, I believe, has something like almost a dozen research and development centers all over the world, right? Nobody has a monopoly on innovation. So it's not a crazy idea to have gone to Turkey, but it was just creating impediments in terms of structure and design implementation for creative work environment. All right, now let's get into how do you manage innovation during discontinuous change? And you do that with the experiential approach to innovation. Experiential approach to innovation. It assumes that innovation occurs within a highly uncertain environment. You're going to want to remember that one. It uses intuition, flexible option, and hands-on experience, and helps reduce uncertainty and accelerates learning and understanding. The aspects are, first, design iteration. So for this, there's a cycle of repetition in which a company tests a prototype of a new product. It improves on that design, and then it builds and tests the improved prototype. So that's just your basic way. I know you might think like, well, okay, isn't that how it always works? And we're going to find out it's not. You test it, right? So here you have a systematic comparison of different product design and design iteration. Here, I like what your author for testing has, which is really cool, and I want to share it with you. It's on page 146, and it's M-City. And it's a part, well, let me just show it to you. So here's the clip from M-City here.
This is M-City. Here, we bring together industry, government, and academia to advance transportation safety, sustainability, and accessibility for the benefit of society. These diverse partnerships are the foundation of our work. 3 aspects of M-City make it unique: opportunities for research, early-stage testing within our living labs, and our commitment to education and outreach, sharing knowledge and expertise from across the University of Michigan. As a public and private sector R&D initiative, M-City convenes a broad range of automotive and non-automotive companies. Our industry partners are at the forefront of research and development. They collaborate in a pre-competitive environment, exploring the challenges and potential of emerging technologies as leadership circle partners or as affiliate members. We also inform and educate officials working at all levels of government to shape the future of mobility. M-City funds research and offers the opportunity for early-stage testing and deployments within our living labs. The M-City test facility is a specially built, one-of-a-kind proving ground. Here, the performance and safety of connected and automated vehicles are tested under realistic urban conditions within a controlled environment. Testing is also done on the roads of Ann Arbor and Southeast Michigan through vehicle deployments conducted in collaboration with partners. At M-City, the scope of our work extends far beyond technology and test tracks. Our researchers and partners examine how connected and automated vehicles are shaping the future of mobility to address the potential impact on business, law, infrastructure, and society. M-City takes an interdisciplinary approach to research by drawing on expertise at the University of Michigan, bringing together researchers and faculty from disciplines across campus to investigate the effects of connected and automated vehicles on everything from urban planning and public policy to big data and cybersecurity as we test and influence sustainable mobility solutions for applications in the real world.
All right, I think that's good enough. You get the point. So again, that's for testing. If you think about what's really special about this, it's a brilliant way for Michigan to really differentiate itself and to create this core competency as the home of the auto industry yet again, right? So of course, manufacturing is not what it used to be in Michigan. Pretty much, there's virtually no manufacturing compared to what it was. And so Michigan reinvented itself. And in this particular case, if you think about the companies that are involved with M-City, it's international, right? So it's brilliant, but it's created this one area for testing for these smart vehicles. All right, milestones are formal project review points used to assess progress and performance. Pretty straightforward there. Then we're getting into multifunctional teams. So for this one here, you have work teams composed of people from different departments. This is really important. You want to make sure that it's not just a bunch of people from the same department. You want to go up and down in terms of your structure and even horizontally, right? This accelerates learning by integrating technical, marketing, and manufacturing activities. I know that Audi is really, really strong in that area. Powerful leaders provide the vision, discipline, and motivation to keep the innovation process focused, on time, and on target. So again, it's critical that you get that support from the top. All right, so now that we're finished with the experimental the experimental approach to innovation, yes. Let's go into the compression approach, right? So it assumes that incremental innovation can be planned using a series of steps. So this one, unlike the previous one, is used to manage innovation in a more certain environment. You look at compressing the steps to speed innovation, and the aspects are planning, supply involvement, shortening the time of individual steps, overlapping steps, and multifunctional teams again. These are all, again, for the compression approach, which, remember, this one is for a more certain environment. The picture here is for Boeing, the Dreamliner. Famously, this is again your author focusing here, the Boeing Dreamliner was very much built using the compression approach. Organizational decline, yes, there's a feature, there's a highlight on what happened with Radio Shack, right? And so this occurs when companies fail to anticipate, recognize, neutralize, or adapt to internal or external pressure. There's several stages for decline, right? There's the blinded stage. It begins because the managers fail to recognize the internal or external change that will harm their organization. They just, so environmental scanning, which we talked about in the previous chapter, not so much in that department. Then there's the inaction stage. And so as organizational performance problem becomes more visible, management may recognize the need to change, but still take no action. I mean, for me, I can't help it, but when I think about this, I think about, the book written by Micheline Maynard, which was The End of Detroit, early 2000, I think, is when she wrote that book. Late 90s, maybe early 2000, and a lot of people it was book of the year by the Financial Times, and she really kind of almost laid out what was going to happen, and it happened. And in this case, General Motors really, again, all three, GM, Ford, and Chrysler, but GM followed a lot of the stages of this organizational decline, where for various reasons you could identify the stages that it was going through here. In the faulty action stage, so faced with rising cost and decreasing profit and market share, management will announce belt-tightening plans designed to cut cost, increase efficiency, and restore profit. So in other words, rather than recognizing the need for fundamental change, the managers assume that if they just run a tighter ship, the company performance will return to previous levels. So it's not, there's no re-engineering going on, which is a term that we'll talk about later in terms of not just restructuring, but re-engineering the company. It's just, if we tighten our belts, we'll be able to weather the storm. And then the crisis stage. So we're talking about bankruptcy or dissolution, breaking up the company and selling its parts, likely to occur unless the company completely reorganizes the way it does business. So again, reorganize. In this case, I want to just instead maybe use re-engineer. And then of course dissolution, right? So Radio Shack, your author goes into some detail. This is on page 150 about how Radio Shack ended up being its own worst enemy. All right. What are the types of forces and resistance to change? The types of forces. So first, the change forces produce difference in the form, quality, and condition of a firm over time. So these are the change forces. Think of it as internal, right? In terms of, again, using the environmental scan approach and making sure that the company is always thinking ahead and always anticipating and having contingencies so that it can stay, just think of it this way. Instead of fearing change, instead of reacting to change, how about seeing change as an opportunity, right? Change is opportunity. But for you to do that as a company, you need to make sure that you've planned this out, that you've structured for it. So here's the problem. The problem is you have resistance forces. That's the opposite of your change forces, right? They support the existing condition in organizations. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. You're going to have a lot of people who are very upset. Maybe there's silos in the company and they want to protect the silos, and that's at the detriment of the company itself. Or maybe there's just personal fear. You're finding out. Of course, it's a natural thing. There's even research that shows it's just human biology that change is bad. We've learned what works, and we have to follow this, and that's how we do it. And people don't really. We're not wired. We're not built for that. I want to take a little detour here and give you some advice. I want you to be that one person where you work or in life that, rewires their brain. And when maybe your boss comes up to you and says, from now on, starting Monday, we're going to do things differently, starting a new operating system or, inventory system, whatever. And you're thinking, oh no, I'm so good at using this existing one. People come to me for advice. I'm very efficient and effective. And then right away you think, what if I'm not good? That's kind of a natural thing. I want you to kind of rewire your brain a little bit. And I want you instead to think like, okay, how can I do this thing now? Can I be part of the team that tests it out? Are you guys going to release it ahead of time? What can I do to be part of the change? You will see a huge difference in your career if you start to think that way. Management will recognize you as someone that not only they don't have to worry about forcing to do something, but on top of that, someone who gets it, who's understands that change is inevitable, and that you can help the company get there. So again, just maybe some food for thought. Resistance to change. All right. So results from self-interest, maybe misunderstanding and distrust, and a general intolerance for change. Well, I have to tell you, here we are, October 2020, right now when I'm recording this lecture. And I know that at Chaffey College, and I know in other institutions, there are a lot of, several faculty members who have really struggled with this change of being forced to go online. Of course, I know it's, even worse for students, right? A lot of students who really only wanted to take face-to-face classes, never were interested. And I know some of those students have decided they're just going to take a hiatus. They're just not even going to take any classes until one day things get back to normal. And so, again, resistance to change is a natural thing. And it can happen for different reasons. We've had several people retire early. They just thought, I'm not going to do this thing. So again, managing change, unfreezing. So this is going to be really cool because it's going to show you what are the ways that, again, this is from Kurt Levin, managing organizational change is a basic process of unfreezing, change intervention, refreezing. So unfreezing, just think about people being frozen, the company being frozen, and before you just force things to change, you have to get people to unfreeze. So you get the people affected by change to believe that change is needed, right? Maybe believe is not the best word, but that's what we have here. And so, logically convince them that if we don't change, we're going to go bankrupt anyway. Change intervention. Now you get the workers and managers to change their behavior and work practices. There's a great example here in your book from Kaiser, right? So this is on page 152. Bernard Tyson, who passed away recently and was the CEO of Kaiser. There's a quote from him. The biggest problem. So this is when Kaiser, once upon a time, had to transition from paper records to digital medical records, but on top of that, using telemedicine service. So again, this is remote medicine, right? This is not face-to-face here, meeting someone in person, but remote. And there's a quote from Bernard Tyson when he had said, the biggest problem was our physicians had a bond with the patient. It was the personal touch, the personal voice, personal phone call. The physician is the advocate of the patient. Anyway, basically, he's explaining how changing the culture, the corporate culture of physicians, nurses, healthcare providers, everybody at Kaiser was not easy. You have to explain and get everybody to understand why the change intervention is critical. Refreezing, once everybody's adapted to and is now following the new way, you support and reinforce new changes so that they can stick. All right, what are the methods used to manage resistance to change? So people are resisting. The first thing is education. Again, this is why we're doing it. This is why it has to be done. Look at our market share. Look at the new technology. Look at globalization, whatever it is. If we don't do it, none of us are going to have a job. That's it. And so not only do we want to have a job, but hopefully we want to build, we want to grow as a company, we want to take advantage of the change. Communication, you can't just go in and say, hey, this is why we have to do this and we're going to do it, see y'all later, good luck. This is an ongoing thing, you have to just communicate. Participate, again, upper, middle, line management, everybody's involved, but especially upper management. Negotiate. Some people are not going to like the terms. Again, I'm using this example. There's a lot of negotiating with COVID. When, for example, institutions that are unionized, negotiation between admin and the unions about the healthcare of employees, the employees that are going to be out there and risk their lives to pay the bills, right? Should they get paid extra? Or should they just, you're lucky you have a job? And so there's got to be some negotiation, and responsible organizations are going to find a way to maybe monetarily or in any way reward their employees that are out there risking their lives. And then top management support. So again, the participation and top management support. And if none of that works, then it's coercion. Look, if you're not, I'm telling you because this is when you use the power of the position. I'm your boss, etc. And you have to do it because we said so. And if you don't, well then, goodbye. What are the errors in leading change? So at the unfreezing phase, maybe you didn't establish a great sense of urgency. Maybe you didn't go back, maybe you didn't communicate, and people are just like, well, you can do that later. Or not creating a powerful enough coalition. During the change phase, maybe lack of vision. People need to understand why this is happening. You have to really communicate the significance of it. Or maybe you under-communicated the vision. Again, you just made one speech and you left. You're not removing obstacles. You're not systematically planning for and creating short-term wins. Whenever someone is showing that they've mastered the new thing or the new way, you need to celebrate that and let everybody know that, of course, it's possible and here's why. Maybe you declared victory too soon and you're not anchoring changes in the corporate culture. That's going to be, we're going to learn later on about culture. That's the hardest thing to change. There's so many things in companies that we'll talk about in terms of change, but changing corporate culture is the most difficult thing to change. What are the change tools and techniques? So first, result-driven change, right? We're on page 154. Created quickly by focusing on the measurement and improvement of results. So you've all heard of Zara, right? Z-A-R-A. And Zara is not just some funky, goofy little retailer that sells clothes. Zara, in fact, the CEO of the company that owns Zara a few years back was the wealthiest man in the world, ahead of Bill Gates and everybody else. And so this is a very, very successful company. Zara is a Spain-based retailer that is not just known for fast fashion, but one of the pioneers. Has 350 designers send brand new styles to stores at Zara.com twice a week. Because designers get daily data on what's selling, they can react to fashion trends by going from concept to ready-for-sale clothing in just 3 weeks. By the way, in retail for clothing and fashion, obviously the longer you take, the worse it is because fashion moves pretty fast, at least I've been told. If daily reports show surging demand for a particular product, Zara airlifts them, which is the most expensive way to ship, to get them in store as fast as possible. Again, just showing you that that's how Zara has worked. It's been result-driven change. The GE fast work is fascinating. If next time you go to a physical bookstore like Barnes and Nobles and you go to the business section, you're going to see GE all over the place. And there's a reason for it. General Electric really has been a benchmark in management, especially continuous improvement. Six Sigma, they didn't invent it, but they popularized it. Motorola invented it. Anyway, GE has one of the core competencies of GE was that they've been able to optimize decision making. Let me explain. Many companies are this is a paralysis, right, in terms of decision making, where they debate for too long. They want more data. They want to hire more experts. They want to do more research because they're so afraid the investment will not have the return that they desire. GE, really, it's one of the things that it's historically been strong with is making decisions quickly. And so this is called the GE FastWorks. Quickly experiment with new ideas to solve customer problem and learn from repeated test and improvement. So in this case, if you think about prototypes with the FastWorks, they will basically create quick prototype, and it doesn't have to be a perfect prototype. That's why they call it FastWorks, and show it to the customer. The customer get feedback, and then do it again, and do it again, and do it again, and do it again, until eventually they have a real maybe working prototype. They might have 6, 7, and then once they have something that looks like it's a finally the approved upon prototype, then they will build several versions of that prototype for broader testing and feedback. And so again, it's GE is one of the pioneers in that. And then organizational development. For this one, think of that. We're not the opposite almost of the GE fast work. For this one, it's taking a long range approach to change, right? Assumes that top management support is necessary for change to succeed, creates change by educating workers and managers to change ideas, beliefs, behaviors. So in this particular, again, philosophy and collection of planned change intervention design to improve organizations' long-term health and performance takes a very long-range approach to change. How to create a results-driven change program. Measurable short-term goals to improve performance. Make sure action steps are likely to improve the measured performance. Stress the importance of immediate improvement and solicit help from consultants and staffers to achieve quick improvements in performance. Then, once you've done that, you test action steps to see if they actually yielded improvement. If they don't, you get rid of them. And use the existing resource or the ones that can be easily acquired. So that's the process here. Now, what are the general steps for organizational development intervention? So, entry, the problem is discovered, need for change becomes apparent. A search begins for someone to deal with the problem and facilitate change. So that's when you get a change agent that enters the picture, works to clarify the problem, and gains commitment to a change effort. You assess, you get feedback, then you get into the action plan. The plan agent works with decision makers to develop an action plan. Next phase, intervention. The action plan or organizational development intervention is carried out. Evaluation. The change agent helps decision makers assess the adoption. Organizational member accept ownership and responsibility of the change, which is then carried out through the entire organization. And then lastly, separation, change agent leaves the organization. This, by the way, could be done by a consulting firm. Let's look at the types of organizational development intervention. You've got your large system intervention, socio-technical system, survey feedback, small group intervention, and person-focused intervention. I'm not really going to bug you too much with those. And that's pretty much it. This is it for our chapter. I know we packed a lot, almost an hour. Is really trying to do it in less time. As always, make sure you get all of your key terms out of the way. We covered everything, right? Yes, yes, yes. So get all of those out of the way. Make sure that you unfreeze any resistance you may have to doing your homework and studying for the exam. Or you're going to get a bad grade. I will coerce you into making sure you do well. Let's see, you're doing well because of course you want to learn, right? That's the result-driven change. Again, the summary, make sure you wrap your head around those. And that's it for this chapter that we were able to do in less than an hour. Next, brace yourself, global management. Not gonna lie, one of my favorite chapters. For those of you who already took global business with me, there'll be a little bit of repetition, but I promise we're going to definitely have, of course, this is a management class, so the focus here will not be just on global business, but global management. See you guys all next week for Chapter 8 on global management. Please make sure you read that chapter before we get there.